So the recording is on. Well, thank you so much everyone for being here again. This is Tahi from UX Rescue. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Michelle to everyone very briefly, and I will have Michelle introduce herself very soon. So as a lot of you may be aware, Michelle is a living legend of UX research industry. She has a lot of experience teaching and coaching a lot of UX researchers and those who may not be UX researcher but who practice UX research, and get them to do the research in a right way. So she's currently running Curiosity Tank to share her extensive knowledge. And she is also running a research workshop called Ask Like a Pro, which is class I got to experience a bit as well. And it's been fantastic. So I am super honored to have Michelle share her talk today with us. So that's a little bit about Michelle. And before I hand mic over to Michelle, I would like to talk a little bit about UX Rescue as well, just in case some of you might have not heard of UX Rescue and who are actually here because you heard about Michelle. So UX Rescue is a UX volunteer community. It's global community and we work 100% remote. So we connect UX practitioner to organizations that are in need. So if you come to UX Rescue, you will get to find a real world experience with organizations that are in need, that work for the social causes. And also you can work on many different areas for UX Rescue as well. So if you're interested in, make sure you sign up through our website. So that's a little bit about UX Rescue, and I will hand over the mic to Michelle now. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Let me get set up here.
And stop my sharing.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. We can't see myself. There I am. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I recognize some names. Welcome. I'm super excited to share my little slice of passion with you. As Dahi mentioned, my name is Michele Ronsen, and I am the founder and the creator of Curiosity Tank. I am a user research executive, an educator, and I teach people around the world how to ask better questions so that they can make more informed decisions. All of my corporate trainings and my direct trainings through Curiosity Tank, and all of my work through teaching at schools like General Assembly and UC Berkeley, the Academy of Art, and the California College of the Arts are informed by my own experiences crawling through the trenches of some just amazing organizations over the last 10 years as our user research industry was really growing and taking shape. About 10 years ago, I founded my first firm, which was called Ronsen Consulting. And last year, I rebranded that firm under the name of Curiosity Tank with the express purpose to help more people learn how to upskill specifically in user research. Last year, I reached over 3,200 students through my workshops and teaching alone. And LinkedIn also honored me with a Top Voices Award in technology, which I bring up because I think it's incredible awareness for our industry, and anyone that's interested in research and learning more about research, or perhaps transitioning into the field or improving in the field. That's just extraordinary recognition for us as an industry. Here are some of the amazing organizations I've had a chance to work with. Even more amazing than these brands and conducting research or teaching their teams how to conduct research is the people that I've had a chance to work with alongside at these great teams. I mean, I have learned along with the best of the best, and I am so grateful and so appreciative for every single experience I've had, and every colleague I've met along the way has really helped shaped my my research practice and thinking and education. So I'm known for providing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but there is this pop-up blocking the screen.
Oh.
That's downloading CT1 updated.
Downloading.
Oh, it's gone now.
It's gone?
Yes. When you exited the the presentation, it was gone.
Okay. Let me, is it coming back?
Yeah, it's coming back.
Start the recording. Okay, thank you for letting me know about that pop-up. So if you've taken any of my classes before, or my workshops, or spoken with any of my students, you'll find that I provide a fire hose of information, and this is by design. I am a classically trained designer, and my classes and workshops are all highly experiential, if you will. And there's going to be something for everybody, no matter what level you're at. And please, I encourage you to go back and listen to the recordings. Every time you listen to the workshop, you'll be able to pick up something new. So we're going to go through a lecture style presentation and then have a Q&A. I have some safety material, some super fun activities if we can get to it. I'm not sure how quickly we'll be able to move those, so that's why I say it's time permitting. Please take bio breaks and water breaks as needed, and ask questions, please. There's no bad questions. I ask questions for a living. You're in a safe space. Please ask away. We will not be taking a formal break today. So again, I encourage you to ask questions. You can go ahead and throw them in the chat. I can't see you, so I won't be able to call on you, but Dahi, maybe you can help out and facilitate some of those questions as they come up. And I'm serious, ask me anything. I'm an open book. I'm happy to share thoughts on anything from costs to client challenges and everything else. There's really no bad questions. So with that, I welcome you. And you guys ready? Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Ready to go? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. All right, great. I did paste this link into the chat channel. I compiled a whole bunch of resources for you guys and links. Dahi, maybe if you could copy and paste that and re-put it into the chat for people that joined after. And there's some discounts in here and some direct resources as well. So for today, I'd like to quickly go through some assumptions and lay some groundwork so we can get into the real meat of our conversation, which is going to be focused on user research methods and actions. So I'm going to go through some quick assumptions. I'm going to provide you with some process and context. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about research methods and action. And I'm going to share a tool with you. And then again, time permitting, if we can, we will get to some exercises. All right, so first, some assumptions. I'd like to lay a quick foundation. I'm making the assumption that you understand what user research is and isn't, that you understand the types of questions that user research can and should inform, and which it should not. I'm also making the assumption that where and when to research during the product development lifecycle is understood or at least appreciated, and that there's also an awareness that stakeholder engagement is the leading indicator of success in your own studies. I bring these things up as assumptions at this point because we don't have time in our 90 minutes today to start at the very, very beginning. Research questions are also different from the questions that we ask participants. There is a very important kind of notion of speaking to the right people at the right time. So I like to break that out, and we want to ask the right people the right questions in the right way. And that's really the magic formula that sets us up for success. I'm also going to make the assumption that you know why Mitigating bias is so important, and some quick ways to go ahead and do that. And the basic principles of user research ethics. If you're interested in diving into any of these things, I cover them in depth in my other workshops, but just today we're not going to have a chance to get to them. So if you're interested in terms of what does a user researcher do, most of the time, or how does a user research spend their day, these are the questions that I explore most frequently. And while they're numbered sequentially 1 through 8, they don't necessarily come to me in this sequence. I could be brought in at number 5, and then I could move to number 2, and then I could go to number 8. But I typically am hired to answer or explore one of the following questions. What should we build? Right? This is when a team or a company has an idea, they see a product, they see an opportunity space, and they aren't quite sure how to go about filling it. Number 2 is, who are my customers? Or maybe they call them users or members or subscribers or drivers, things like that. And not just who are they from a demographic standpoint, but how do they think? How do they feel? What motivates them? How do they behave? And next is, are we building the right thing? Usually teams ask, are we building the right thing, when they're not super confident or something isn't working as expected. After that would be, are we building the thing right? So are we building the right thing and are we building the thing right are two very different questions. And I spent a lot of time in between there. Are we building the thing right is more about, are we taking the right approach? Sometimes we explore things like, why did this metric go up or down? Like, what's really going on here? Do our customers, our subscribers, our members, our drivers, whoever our target audience is, do they understand X, Y, or Z, right? Like, how do they interpret this? Does it make sense to them? Number 7, how can we build a better mousetrap, right? How can we improve X, Y, or Z? How can we make it faster, better, or more intuitive? And number 8, should we implement this feature or sunset this feature, right? Pros and cons associated with that. After that, people began to ask me if I could teach their teams how to do what I do, or if I could teach them how to do what I do. So as we dive into this presentation, I'd just like to remind you to just take a couple of notes. I encourage you to write down just 2 or 3 things that you'd like to take away, and then try to apply those, right? Try to explore those, but don't try to take mad notes. You're going to have the recording, right? Just do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you will do better, okay? But it's going to be a fire hose. All right, so let's lay a quick foundation. There is a question in the chat. Dahi, is that for me? I'm not sure at this point.
Randy just shared a question that he was hoping to hear what types of questions are best handled via group workshop or other UX research method.
We will talk about that when we talk about participatory design. Randy, if I don't dive into it specifically, please remind me in context. Yes. Yep, you got it. Okay. So user research follows a very specific process for qualitative studies. And I want to go ahead and just lay that out. So we're all, again, starting with just like a similar foundation. So step number 1, we want to ask ourselves, what do we already know? What do we know about the people we want to design for? What do we know about the opportunity space? What do we know about the problem space? What do we know about this topic in relationship to what we're trying to learn or build or improve? Number 2, we want to prepare to make an investment, right? We want to prepare to make a user research investment, both in terms of resources and time and money, okay? So the investment is not just for the researcher, it's for all of the core stakeholders. We need our stakeholders to be collaborative, equal partners in our research to get the most out of it, okay? So we want to prepare to make an investment, number 2. We want to confirm what we don't already know, right? We want to confirm what we're trying to learn and what can't reasonably be inferred from other sources. We want to confirm we have the time and the will to act on what we will learn, right? And we want to confirm that the stakes are high enough that we'd regret erring on the side of rapid iteration. Okay, we want to come together with all of our stakeholders to really get on the same page of these things. At the end of the day, what we want to do is get on the same page in terms of what are we looking to learn and how will the learnings be applied, right? These things are really critical because UX is a team sport. Dahi, do you have something to add? No, okay. Number 3, you want to meet with your team to get started, okay? The steps that I mentioned earlier are done before your formal kickoff. Now, sometimes stakeholder kickoffs can happen individually, sometimes they can happen asynchronously, sometimes they happen in a combination of individually or synchronously or asynchronously. That's all going to depend upon you and your team and your culture. Number 4, assuming that there's buy-in to actually do the project.
Is this a USDC thing?
Yeah.
So it's not.
I'm sorry, say again? I missed that. Maybe you can enter it into the chat and then Dahi, you can filter it to me.
I think that was just incident, Michelle.
Okay, great. Okay, so assuming that there is buy-in from your stakeholders, we don't have the information we need, we're committed to collaborating throughout the process and implementing on the learnings, then we begin the planning process. Planning is the very first step, and this is absolutely critical, okay? This is where we identify the right questions, and we want to focus our time and efforts on identifying and agreeing on the right questions at the onset with our stakeholders. We need to build the rapport with our stakeholders and include them in the process at this very beginning stage to generate interest and buy-in. So research planning is the first critical step, right? A failure to plan is a plan to fail. You need a solid research plan. You will never be successful without a solid research plan, simply being because there's no way to measure your success if there isn't an agreed upon plan. It will also help bring the team closer and close the gaps. It will help establish what you're looking to learn and why. It will help triangulate all the assumptions and the hypotheses. It will help you form your goalposts. And it should be, again, developed in collaboration. And it's at this stage that you'll also begin to discuss the most appropriate methods, your recruiting criteria, your deliverables, and the timeline, okay? Planning allows you to get the biggest bang for your buck from your research dollar. If you don't have 2 hours to create a plan, you shouldn't be doing research. Simply put, you can tell your stakeholders that. After we build the plan, then we need to find the right people, right? So we use a survey screener to help us find the people who are best suited to provide us with the information we need. And to do this, we need to identify the attitudinal and behavioral criteria from the people we want to screen into our study and the people we want to screen out. We can also use the survey screener approach to identify what I refer to as smoke signals to help inform our segmentation, our methods, our activities, our question, our protocol, and our activities within the protocol. It's a really, really important step. After we identify the right people and we schedule them and we go through all of our massive orchestrating and logistics, then we're going to want to ask them the questions in the right way, right? There's many ways to go about interviewing. There are many activities that we can do within interviews. There are many ways to gather this data. Perhaps you'll be conducting an interview, perhaps you'll be conducting a card sort, perhaps you'll be conducting a card sort within an interview, perhaps you're going to be conducting an ethnography, leading a workshop, or so forth. It just says interview here because this is how we are going to collect the information in some data generating way. But we could really substitute this with whatever method is most appropriate. There is definitely no silver bullet to how you conduct an interview, to how you write a protocol, to how you author a discussion guide, to what kinds of questions you ask, the sequence you ask them. Every study is going to take on a different approach. I can conduct 5 studies about how to optimize an onboarding flow, and all 5 studies might look different. But there are some best practices, right? And these best practices work across the board. Interviews include discussion guides and how to author a proper discussion guide. There are a slew of best practices around that. Guides are critical. Guides are actually detailed plans of exactly what will happen in an interview, not just what you will say, but how much time you will dedicate to each, what you will dive into if you have more time or less time, what your probing questions are, your must-have questions versus your nice-to-have questions, timestamps, links, and everything else. I have templates for all of these things in the Ask Like a Pro series. Guides also include all of the other activities that take place in the session. You may want to add in the questions to your colleagues there. You're going to include your opening script where you seek permission to record. You're going to set up your participant for success, and you're going to CYA for yourself. All of this is included in my guides and templates.
Michelle,
Yep.
quick question from the audience. Will this amazing presentation slides be available as well?
Not the slides, but the recording will be.
All right, thank you.
Sure. After we collect the information and the data that we need, then we move into a phase called analysis and synthesis. And this is where we make sense of the information we collected. Many people think this is the most fun also. I love analysis and synthesis. Experts begin analysis and synthesis actually during the data collection process, okay? So we can begin analysis and synthesis and leverage our time to become most efficient and most strategic by using a note-taking framework. Okay, so by using a note-taking framework, we're organizing the right data to analyze and synthesize in real time. And it's incredibly effective and efficient. Gathering piles of data is not necessarily the best approach. In fact, it's often a huge time suck. So I teach my students how to take notes with note-taking frameworks and tools and templates to streamline the amount of data they collect to expedite analysis and synthesis. The more you gather, the more you have to sift through. So more data is not always better. In fact, it can be very inefficient. So you want to think strategically about what you gather, how you gather it, and when you gather it. So experts in the field right-size the type and amount of data that we collect, and we do that through note-taking frameworks. So here you have it. This is the overall process. The last phase in the process is to present the learnings to motivate your teams into action. We present with impact, right? And there's different goals to different presentations and different research studies. We cover all of these things in the Ask Like a Pro series. We go into depth, but what we're going to focus on today are different methods in action. The blue box, okay? How do we collect information in the right way? So without further ado, let me pause for any questions before we get into user research in action.
No other questions on the chat yet, but if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can leave the questions to the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, so people ask me all the time, I'm in this situation, what process should I use? And while I hate to come back with a question, I'm going to come back with a couple of questions. There are 3 core questions that will help you understand what the best method to use is. The first question is, where are you in the process? Are you in the very beginning stages, where you're generating a better understanding of your audience, of your problem space, of your opportunity space? That would focus your efforts on generative research methods. Or are you in the evaluative phase? Does something already exist in which someone can evaluate something? Do you have a prototype? Do you have a storyboard? Is it something that's already functioning and out there in the wild? Okay, that would be evaluative. So where are you in the process will really help inform whether you're going to apply a generative method or an evaluative method. The second question is, what are you looking to learn? Are you looking to learn about attitudes, or are you looking to learn about behaviors? Or are you looking to learn about both? Okay, so where are you in the process and what are you looking to learn? And third is, what level of confidence are we looking for? Are we looking for a strong smoke signal that we're going to iterate on? Or are we looking for a much more profound level of confidence that might even be statistically relevant? Okay. So these three questions should be taken into primary consideration when you are choosing the methods, right? Are you in the beginning, or are you at the middle or towards the end? This will determine whether you're focused more on generative research or evaluative research. Do you want to understand why people are doing this, or why they think that way, or what they are doing? That will inform whether it's qualitative or quantitative. And do you want to focus more on attitudes or behaviors, on what people say or what people do? So again, identifying these mindsets and kind of organizing these frameworks in your head will put you in a better position to make a better choice. So to go back to those sample questions that I shared earlier, the 8 questions that I spend most of my time exploring, here are some of those questions in context. What should we build is a generative question. Are we building the right thing is an evaluative question, okay? Why do they do that, right? What attitudes have driven them, or what attitudes do they have about food shopping, right? That's a qualitative question. Where do they food shop? What are they food shopping for? That's a behavioral question. One's qualitative, one's quantitative, okay? I really hate going to the supermarket is attitudinal. I go to the store or the market 3 times a week is behavioral. So you want to understand the key differences and when to use each one. This is a landscape of user research methods developed by Christian Rohr for the Nielsen Norman Group. You may have seen this before. It's not particularly intuitive to understand. So I'd like to take a moment and just spend some time here. You may or may not be able to see an axis, an XY axis in the center of this. The methods that are listed on the top of the axis above the line are primarily behavioral. The methods that are listed towards the bottom below the center point are primarily attitudinal. The methods listed on the right are primarily quantitative. The methods listed on the left are primarily qualitative. Where you see methods that can go one way or the other, like card sorting at the bottom, that means it could either be qualitative or quantitative, okay? Ethnographies, you see it on the left, can either be behavioral or attitudinal. So hopefully if you've seen this before, you now have a better understanding of it. And as we go through the methods, this will make more sense as well. Okay, before we dive in, I want to spend just a minute talking about the lingo. So our terminology in user research and in UX, quite frankly, is just this giant clusterfuck, to be very honest. We have made a mess out of our language. We confuse each other all the time. So I'd like to just clarify a few key terms. Usability testing is very different from user testing, is very different from usertesting.com. And I can tell immediately how seasoned you are by the terminology that you use. So let's take a quick run through of these things to, again, establish that foundation. So usability testing evaluates existing products and services by gathering direct input with people who are interacting with it. It is a form of evaluative research. Someone is evaluating something. The primary focus is to understand ease of use and related opportunities. In contrast, user testing is a common misnomer. It's like nails on a blackboard to someone like me. We never conduct user testing because we don't test people. We test products, we test content, we test directions, we test experiences, we test prototypes, we test services. We don't test people. So please, for the love of God, remove this phrase from your lexicon.
And Michelle, we have a quick question about this.
Yep.
So Allison just read about this alternative to usability testing. It's called content testing, she believes, and generally happens during the generative research. Do you have any experience with this, and where does this sit?
Yep, we can do content tests on clarity, on comprehension, on priority, on whether or not something is intuitive or easy to understand. Yes, lots of testing. And it could be on, a sentence or a paragraph or a description, or even content testing on labels or tags or names of navigation or names of products or buckets or name of a feature or functionality. All of that could fall under content testing. Yes.
And we had more questions coming through for the usability testing. So if usability testing is for existing products, what do we call the research for products in development?
Generative research, right? Before we have something to evaluate, we refer to it as either generative or formative research, right? Because we're generating a better understanding of the people, the product, the opportunity, or the space in order to create that first prototype, in order to, get that better understanding.
And another question similar to that, can you conduct usability testing with prototypes that are about to be implemented? So how do you define existing products?
It doesn't have to be, we can conduct a usability test on a prototype. It doesn't have to be something that is existing out there in the wild and live. We can conduct usability testing on a functional prototype, for sure.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, so usertesting.com in comparison is a platform. It's an on-demand platform that helps us facilitate different types of research. We can run moderated or unmoderated studies on it. It allows us to record studies, edit studies, take notes in studies, transcribe studies. It will allow us to test on both mobile and tablets and desktop. They have their own panel we can recruit from. We can upload our own recruit to their platform. It's a very versatile, very robust testing platform that's also extremely expensive. You're only going to see subscriptions to usertesting.com with large UX, more UX mature organizations. All right, so now let's get into methods in action, and I'm going to define what a lot of these are so that you know what you're looking at. So we already covered usability studies and what a usability study entails. It entails people actually interacting and providing input on something they are evaluating. Right? The focus is primarily to understand ease of use and related opportunities. We can perform a usability study on a prototype or something that is live out there in the wild, and a lot of other form factors. Okay. Usability testing can also be performed on something like a coffee machine. So this does not have to be digital. We can also act out some, we can test it on hardware. We can do service design, right? We can do a lot of different, it can take a lot of different forms. It's not just a digital prototype or a digital product. In contrast, ethnographic field studies are where we actually go into the environment that we're looking to learn more about. We're going to immerse ourselves in the culture and the lives of the people that we're looking to better understand. We want to understand their thoughts and behaviors in the context of that natural setting. So the example I like to use here is if we're working for Callaway Golf and Callaway wants to develop a line of golf clubs and sporting equipment for people who play golf in wheelchairs, we would really benefit from going to a place where people play golf in wheelchairs. Maybe we want to talk to trainers. Maybe we want to talk to these golfers. Maybe we want to go to a golf sporting store that sells golf equipment to find out what adjustments need to be made, right? We want to go into context and immerse ourselves. Now, participatory design is where researchers come together with a product's customers and collaborate on the design process together. This is also known as co-design, right? Randy, this relates to your question. So if I'm not going deep enough and I don't remember your exact question yet, definitely chime in here. So this allows us to co-design solutions and truly understand the problem space and the opportunity space and the lexicon and everything directly in real time. Right? So the designers and the product managers can focus their time and efforts on the right aspects. I see a bunch of stuff in the chat.
We have another question about what you just shared. So a question from Allison. Do UX researchers often do totally blind studies during the ethnographic research?
Sometimes we do blind studies and sometimes they're branded. It really depends on what we're looking to learn and how those learnings will be applied. For anyone that's confused by that term, blind studies, it means, do I identify who I'm doing the research for? Think of Coke and Pepsi, right? If I'm doing a study for Coke and I want to interview Pepsi drinkers, I might not want to reveal that I'm working for Coke. Did I interpret that question correctly?
Seems like it. And another question from Helen. Does it count as an ethnographic field study if you ask a participant to do an on-screen walkthrough showing how they normally do something? For example, how they normally search for tech support, what they do once they are navigating, or is this not the natural setting?
That could be the natural digital setting. We'd probably refer to that more as contextual inquiry. The key with ethnographies is the researcher physically going into that space. And there's often activities involved in the session.
And a question from Randy, just clarifying the question that he asked. So Randy's question was more about how to describe a question that is best handled in a stakeholder workshop via other UX method later. So I think we can cover that bit later during the stakeholder interview if there is any content.
Yeah, Randy, I need a little bit more. Give me some more to work with. Give me some more to work with.
Yeah, I mean, did you want me to do that now or like at the tail end of this?
Let's do it at the end when you see if I don't cover it. You got it.
All right, great.
Keep me honest though. Help me remember.
Oh, I will.
Okay. All right. So diary studies are different methods. We call these longitudinal studies because they collect information over a longer period of time. Let's say that we're looking to do a study about the home buying process, right? We can't cover that in an hour or two, right? It's a journey. Diary studies are akin to clinical trials in the medical field, right? We don't know the effects of the medicine right away. We have to study it over a period of time. So diary studies are a great way to gather information over a horizon, right? Typically users, the people that we're gathering information from, are asked to self-record and report on specific activities or with their attitudes about the topic at regular intervals. Maybe it's every other day for a 10-day period. Card sorts can be both qualitative and quantitative. Card sorts help us sort or help us understand how the people we're designing for sort topics into groupings that make sense to them, right? The results will help us understand how they organize their thinking about these topics, which is totally instrumental in creating things like intuitive architecture and bundling features and functionality together in different tiers of service. Think about a gold service, a silver service, or a bronze level of service, right? Card sorting can be used in a both generative way and in an evaluative way. It can be used in a statistically significant way. It can be disseminated in a moderated or unmoderated way. It can be a method that stands on its own, or it can be a method that we embed into something like a one-on-one interview. Click tests, on the other hand, are purely quantitative. Click tests measure the time it takes someone to click on an action. So often we would create the question that says something like, where would you first click to schedule a doctor's appointment? And a click test will record whether or not it was an accurate click and the time it took them to make that click. So we're measuring time to task. It produces something called a heat map. And these are also really helpful to help us understand navigations, link structure, and performance. Now, we want our time to task to be a low measurement. And we also want our accuracy to be a high measurement. So we toggle with click tests to find time to task balance. A 5-second test is where we show something to our users for 5 seconds, and then we take it away. And we ask them questions about what they just saw, right? We can do this with a fondue pot packaging. We could do this with, a website. We could do this with a magazine cover or a movie poster or a storyboard or whatever. But the idea is we show it for 5 seconds and then we take it away, and then we gather their initial impressions. Okay. An AP test is purely quantitative. It's also known by other names such as multivariate testing or split testing. At the end of the day, what we're doing is comparing 2 versions of something with just one change. So let's look at my fondue pot here. Maybe I'm looking at, sorry, it's tilted. Maybe I'm looking at whether this banner should be in red. Right? That would be the only change. Or maybe I want to test whether strawberries is more appealing than, what's another good fondue thing? Pretzels or pound cake or something like that. Okay. But we only change one thing so that we can measure which one converts best. A/B testing is all about conversion. And surveys, you're probably all very familiar with. Now, many of you have probably authored surveys. I'll be the first, the last, and the millionth person, if I can, to help you and the rest of the world understand that authoring sound surveys that do not introduce bias is an art in itself. The whole democratization of survey software has made us feel like anybody can author a survey and collect the information we need. I'm telling you, it takes years to do that well. To learn how to ask the right questions in the right way with the right question styles, the right response options, the right escape hatches, with piping and branching, it is an enormously sophisticated art. It is an art. So please don't be misled that you could just do a survey and gather the information you need. It will take a long time to build up those costs, but most people are completely misled because they have such a lower setup time and lower admin costs, and the software is so available. All right, so let's look at
question. I'm sorry, Michelle.
Go ahead.
100% agree with the survey, by the way. And a quick question from Harvin. So would the planning for research be different in different industry? For example, building industry, healthcare, mental health?
I'm sorry, would the planning for the survey be different?
For research.
Be different depending upon the industry?
Mm-hmm.
Some industries are going to have to take special considerations. So the example was healthcare. So we have different sensitivities in healthcare, primarily with HIPAA, right? And that is how that we call it HIPAA in the US. I don't know what that's called in other countries, but that's basically health information protection. Does anybody know what HIPAA stands for? I don't know if I've ever even seen it spelled out, but that's basically the information that we collect about people's health care and health stories and health data needs to be stored in a different way. And people have different rights and things like that. So in financial services, we also see some different types of data and requirements there. But for the most part, the planning process is going to focus on you working with your collaborators to identify what are you looking to learn and how will the learnings be applied, then to drill down on the questions to identify what you already know and what we still need to know to get to the next phase. You'll also spend some time talking about the recruiting criteria, the behaviors and attitudes about the people who are best suited to provide you with this feedback, the deliverables, the timeline, and the level of confidence. But there will be some nuances in some industries, but the planning process, I would still approach it exactly the same way from industry to industry. But yeah, some industries have some stricter policies about data collection. Yeah. All right, so what you're looking at here is an example of a co-design workshop, right? Or participatory design. So this was a 4-day workshop I led in Bangkok. Thailand is known for being great manufacturers of toys, but they're not known for being great toy designers. So this was a co-design workshop where designers worked with the people they were designing toys for to co-create these new toy concepts over this 4-day period. So what you see here in the image on the left is adults playing to get into the mindset, right? What you see in image number 2 are designers collaborating to create a pattern to represent the look and feel that they're going for. What you see in number 3 are storyboards. And what you see in number 4 are designers mapping out screens sequence by sequence, but they're doing this with the people that they're designing for. Paper prototypes are a terrific way to gather expectations and establish a benchmark. What you're looking at here are sketches of 4 different screens from a real estate app. And I may very well show this to the home buyers that we're looking to learn from and ask them what they think is going on here. What do they think this section might represent? What information over here would be helpful? What do they expect to see if they do this or that, or swipe up or down or double tap or whatever? And this is a great way to, again, gather expectations and build benchmarks. And it is purposefully very loose because it's easier for people to interpret things that are loose than it is when it is pixel perfect, okay? We'll see this again a little later on, but this is a great way to generate a better understanding of those expectations and needs. Paper prototypes can also be used internally. So what you're looking at here are separate sketches, but focus on the footer. So the image on the upper left and the image in the center right, focus has a drawing of a footer. It says consistent footer, and that arrow I'm trying to convey if it will flip down. The image on the upper right and the image in the lower left, I'm trying to convey a rotating footer. So I'm using paper prototypes here with the designers and the engineers because I know enough about product development to understand that if we have any existing code snippets, I'll be able to get it to market faster, and it will be more of a consistent experience for the users of this social media channel. So I'm also using quick paper prototypes to generate an understanding internally with my team. Now here's an ethnography. What we're doing here is we're studying how people think and feel about car insurance in order to inform the car insurance of the future. We set out to gather this feedback from people in 4 different locations around the United States. 2 locations were urban, 2 were rural or suburban, 2 were in red states, 2 were in blue states. And we focused on 3 segments of people. The first segment of people owned regular cars. They drove to the grocery store, drove their kids to school. They used, 2-car families. They used cars, every day, all the time. The second segment of people did not own cars, but they rented cars from places like Avis and Hertz on a regular basis. Perhaps they lived in an urban area and they went on sales calls every Friday. Or perhaps they lived in a rural area, but drove out to, say, the city on the weekends or something like that. But they rented cars on a regular basis. The third segment of people didn't own cars. They didn't rent cars from places like Avis and Hertz, but they were frequent alternative car riders. They used things like Uber, Lyft, and Get Around and other car share services on a regular basis. But we went into their homes, we went into their glove boxes, we looked at their car mileage logs, we went through their keychains, right, to really understand how they think and feel about car insurance. Some of the activities that we did is we asked them to draw how they felt about car insurance. We asked them to draw what the process was to file a claim. This is an example of some of the activities that we might include in an ethnography, okay? And you can see here that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? You could see people don't know, but they're crying, they're stressed. They're drawing pictures of them in a sinking boat, right? The picture on the bottom literally has a fat cat in the upper right-hand corner. And the person is describing the fat cat as the major executives and stakeholders of the insurance companies who are just robbing them of their money. In the US, insurance is not fondly looked upon. These are some examples of some of the activities that we can do. Here's another workshop. This is an ethnography workshop. Ethnographies help us, it's not an ethnography workshop, it's an empathy mapping workshop. Empathy mapping helps us understand how people think, how people feel, what they would say and what they do, or what they say and what they do around a specific topic. This is an empathy mapping workshop around a fictitious concept called automated payroll. We're gathering feedback from small business owners who process payroll for their employees and from bookkeepers and accountants that process payroll for small businesses, okay? So we can do this in a variety of different ways. This is another workshop. This workshop is focused on building out a healthcare website redesign. For this workshop, we had 4 different segments of people that we gathered information from at every stage, right? The first segment of people were healthy 25-year-olds who don't really go to the doctor unless there's a major problem. They have pink eye or they broke a leg. The second group of people we gathered information from were people who have chronic illnesses. People who have chronic illnesses use their medical insurance differently. They have more doctors, they have more appointments, they have more prescriptions, and they have more complicated lives. They have more tests also. The third group of people we gathered feedback from were healthcare proxies. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I am her healthcare proxy. I'm responsible for making her appointments, getting her medication, and things like that. Other healthcare proxies might be assigned to someone who's incapacitated, maybe someone who can no longer has the mental faculties to make decisions themselves. This often happens in a nursing home or with people that have a concussion. So healthcare proxies were the third segment. Fourth segment of people were healthcare brokers, people who sold healthcare plans to individuals and organizations. So what you're looking at here is a dot voting scale. It's basically like the in-person version of a Likert scale. So we're asking people to place a dot on where they fall in this agreement scale. So we have two polar opposite statements. We ask them to place a dot on where they fall, and then we can use that as a prompt for further discussion. This is another workshop that we did about creativity and innovation in the workspace for a Japanese auto manufacturer. So this was a 3.5-day workshop. The first day was all about creativity and innovation in the workspace and how creativity fuels innovation in the workspace. We also taught them what an ethnography was. Then we paired them up to go out and conduct ethnographies at super creative and innovative workplaces in the Bay Area. They went to IDEO, they went to General Assembly, they went to GoPro, Pinterest, they went to a number of amazing companies, and we had them interview designers at those companies about creativity and innovation in the workspace. They also got a tour of those companies to see how the creativity and innovation manifested in the physical environment. You're going to see a little bit more of this later. We built in activities for them too. Super fun, right? Lots of role-playing activities, lots of activities to fuel that creativity and innovation. If you know nothing about Japanese auto manufacturers or cultures, their environments are completely gray. Their walls are gray, their carpets are gray, their desks are gray. Everybody wears the same outfit. Everybody starts at exactly the same time. They all break for lunch at the same time. They have 15 minutes to rest after lunch at the same time. They go back to work at the same time. There's a line down the hallway telling them which side of the hallway to work on. It's extremely rigid and uncreative. Now, journey mapping is often confused with a user research data generating method. It is not. Journey mapping plots either existing or assumed data. Okay, let me pause there. Journey mapping plots either existing or assumed data. It does not generate new data. There's many different ways to plot this data. What you're looking at is a home security system for a European financial services provider. You're looking at the same exact data plotted differently. The information on the left is telling this journey left to right. The information on the right is talking about the same exact journey in a different way. Stakeholder mapping is the same. Stakeholder mapping does not plot, or stakeholder mapping does not generate data. It is not a data collection methodology. It is a plotting methodology. This is a stakeholder map for that same home security system, right? Here on the left, what we have are concentric circles. So the stakeholders who are most impacted are in the center, and then we move out. Oftentimes, stakeholder maps can be organized by different types of stakeholders: political stakeholders, financial stakeholders, end users, environmental stakeholders, and things like that. Mad Libs are another great way to generate a lot of information in a very disarming way. What you're looking at here is a series of Mad Libs that I created about that fictitious concept called automated payroll. So here I was really digging more into that empathy mapping. What do people think? What do people say? What do people do? And how do people feel about this? So every fill in the blank in this activity corresponds with a think, a feel, a say, or a do. And I reverse engineered the entire thing so that I can extract all the thinks. Lines 6, 14, and 21 were all thinks. Lines 2, 8, and 14 were all feels. Lines 1, 3, and 11 were all do's, and so forth. You can also do these with survey software. You can also do these in Trello. In fact, I did another wave of this exact study in Europe via Trello. So Mad Libs are another method or sentence completion is another method to consider as well. And this is what a click test looks like. So remember, a click test is a quantitative approach that measures time to task and the accuracy of that completion. So the splotches that you see are heat maps. That's where people clicked. So the task in the image on the left says, now your picture, you're visiting this website for the first time. Where would you first click to schedule an appointment or something like that? Now there's 3 correct answers. The upper hamburger menu in the upper right, the logo, and into the sign in to get care big button. All 3 are correct, and we don't necessarily care which one they click, but we want to know that they can find out how to do that and make that click quickly and accurately. Okay. We can also use click tests in other ways to give us additional information. So for example, that top banner is in gray is some sort of announcement or alert. And the task says, imagine this is your first visit to the website. Is this one-time alert on top helpful or not? Click to the right if it's helpful, click to the left if it's not. Okay. What you also see here is a blind study. So I removed the logo so as not to introduce any bias from the people that we're gathering the information from. Okay. The third task on the right says something along the lines of, where would you click, or click on the out-of-pocket maximum for the gold payment, whatever plan. And you can see the clicks are all over the place, right? And we could also tell that it was not easy to complete that task, right? Not a lot of people were able to do that successfully. So click tests produce these heat maps. They show you the percentage of people who clicked where. For this particular study, I ran it with 3 separate concepts. Then I compared time to task across all 3 concepts, okay? And at the end, it will tell you how many clicks and the average time to make that click. Card sorts, again, can be both evaluative or generative. They can be moderated or unmoderated. It can be a portion of a larger study or an activity embedded in a study. It can be its own study. We can ask pre-questions, we can ask post-questions, we can do them with paper in person, or we can do them digitally or remotely. We can use Trello, Google Slides, we can conduct them in any manner of ways. There's also 3 types of card sorts. There's an open card sort, a closed card sort, and a hybrid card sort. When you're in the beginning of the product development process, you're going to want to use an open or hybrid card sort. And that means that your participants will be able to add their own categories or their own topics to help you flesh out your understanding. As you move through the product development cycle and become more informed and more confident, you'll move to a closed card sort where you're giving them all of the topics and the categories, and you're probably going to be looking for statistical relevance. These screenshots are from a platform called Optimal Workshop, which produces something called a dendrogram, a similarity matrix, and a best merge method chart. Very helpful, very easy. I ran an event last night, also a sold out event, 2 sold out events this week, thank you, about card sorts. It was really fun. This is an example of what a dendrogram looks like in a best merge method. And what you see is the thicker the lines, the more often those cards were grouped together. So basically, it is about agreement, right? Different people agreed that these topics are alike, or they would group these topics together. Okay, diary studies Diary studies can collect information through surveys. They can collect information through platforms. They can collect information through forums. This is a diary study about the first 10 days of a mileage tracking app trial period. So you can use the app for 10 days before you decide whether to continue with the free version or upgrade to a paid version. So here we pushed out questions every other day for 10 days, and we just collected the data in a survey format. But again, there's lots of other ways to collect this data. This is an Envision prototype. This was for a new lease creation tool for landlords. So this is a click-through prototype. We gathered feedback from landlords and asked them to create a lease through this prototype. It's a mid-level of fidelity. You'll see it has no color. There are some placeholders there, but it certainly was at a high enough fidelity to give us some terrific usability feedback. Prototypes can be at a variety of different fidelities. I'd call this, pretty mid fidelity. And then you also have interactive prototypes like you see right here, which are super high fidelity. This is a prototype that was actually created with participants' actual data. So it looks exactly like it actually would when it was fully programmed.
We got a question came up from Randy. When does it make sense to do a tree jack test after a card sort? Those are also in optimal workshop.
Yeah, so a tree jack test is kind of like a reverse card sort. I don't typically do tree jacks. Card sorts just kind of work better with my mental model. But typically you're doing a tree jack to test findability.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. Great question. Or navigation, like where would you go to schedule a doctor's appointment, or where would you go to find red shoes or something like that? Okay, so we also conduct research on different platforms. So this is an example of mobile web, right? We can test mobile web, we test mobile apps. This is an actual app. And we were looking to gather some feedback about why people purchase much more frequently on desktop than on this particular app. We also test internal systems. So this is an internal CRM, and we're testing with employees that use the CRM, customer management system, if you will. And one of the very first slides I showed you in this section was that sketch of the real estate screens. I created that sketch, that paper prototype, from the high-end ProtoPie version. ProtoPie is a prototyping software that is extremely high fidelity and really allows you to test things like taps and gestures, okay? Really micro nuanced things like that. So I held this up to the window and then I traced over it. Now, you may remember I used that initial paper prototype of this tracing, that very loose, to gather expectations and needs from the people that we were designing for. Once I established that, then I came back with this high-end prototype and had them perform some tasks on it. In the end, I was able to ask them questions about their initial expectations and the experience they actually had to compare and contrast. Oftentimes, we're also combining evaluative and generative. So this is the same mobile web mobile web software that I showed you earlier, just a couple of screens ago, and where we were trying to identify why sales differed so much on mobile devices versus on desktop. And in one of the things that we found was that when someone wanted to take a closer look at an item, say a couch, they would tap on the couch, and what was called the PDP, the product description page, is what you see in the top there where it says $1,430. So what the screen is showing here is someone wanted to take a closer look at the couch that is displayed on the upper portion of this screen. But what they expected to happen was different. What they expected to see was a larger image of that couch. They expected that since they had made the commitment to take the closer look, that the software would follow existing behaviors of other retail professionals, right? So if you think about it, if you click on a Williams-Sonoma link, right, and you click on the serving tray or the fork or whatever, the image is generally bigger, and it also gives you direct access to other views. So when the first person said this, I asked them to grab a pen and paper and to quickly draw for me what they envisioned. And then I did it for the next participant, and then the next participant, and the next participant. And you could see that they all drew variations on the same behavior. So this was spontaneous in a lot of ways, but we also combined the evaluative and the generative, and it was very effective. Oftentimes we're combining methods as well. We're doing an A/B test and then following it up with a survey, or we're doing a survey screener and then following it up with an interview, or we're running an interview and then following up with a concept test and then a survey. These are just examples, but in most instances, we're combining two or more methods. So I talked about them in isolation, but I want to just carve out time to specifically discuss them in terms of how we might daisy chain them together or how they build on one another as well. All right, let me pause there and see what questions you guys have. No? Okay. So I have a tool for you in your research document, your handout. It's called How Do I Research? And this is a cheat sheet. It's a decision tree, if you will. So if you haven't already opened that up, please open it up because it's cropped here. You can't see it. And what you'll see here is a column on the left that says research type. On the top, you see generative. In the middle, you see evaluative, and on the bottom, you see market research. What you want to know, these are sample questions that might fall under that type. Then the third column is what a researcher would call it. The fourth column are approaches that might be very helpful. Again, it's going to be determined by where you are in the process, what you're looking to learn, what level of confidence you need, how easily accessible the right participants are, how much time you have, and other things. The left column are approaches that would not be helpful. Okay, this is a really, really great tool. I think that complements our topic, and I really hope you enjoy it. Okay, I don't think we're going to have time to do the other exercises, but we can go straight into our Q&A and wrap up. Actually, let me do the wrap up first. And then people can, I'm happy to stay for a few minutes past 5 too. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation and it gave you some food for thought and some inspiration on how to think about different methods in new ways and or clarification on some other methods. I created something called the UX Lex. If you're not familiar with it, it's an evolving interactive glossary of UX terms. Most methods are already defined in here. Please go visit it and help educate yourself. You can sign up for Term Tuesday, where you get a term from the UX Lex emailed to your inbox every Tuesday. And it's a great free way to continue your education. Also, Dahi mentioned my series called Ask Like a Pro, which is also, Randy has completed it as well. I teach this series, which is a real life deep dive into customer research, super hands-on. And we're holding an info session on Monday night. I would love for you guys to join and learn more. If you enjoyed tonight, this is the tip of the iceberg about what we cover there. And you can learn more about the workshops on curiositytank.com and the whole series. So I brought you through the sections, you know, the process of user research in the beginning to lay the foundation for what our conversations would focus on today. Here are the actual workshops included in the series. And please link me in. Very active on LinkedIn. That's actually how I met Randy. And I talk about conversations from the classroom very often. So you will also all be added to my Fuel Your Curiosity newsletter, which is another free resource. I write 2 or 3 times a month, and it's all about user research. And that's another great way to continue learning. Okay, and with that, I turn it over to Q&A. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you, Michelle. This was extremely helpful. And for those of you who haven't signed up for the Curiosity Tank or who are not familiar with the content, I'm receiving it in my inbox as well, and it's extremely helpful. So I hope you guys enjoy as well, and Ask Like a Pro series as well. It's a fantastic series. I cannot recommend it enough. All right. So the first question seems like it's from Randy. Randy, do you want to ask away?
Yeah, sure. Okay, Michelle, you asked for more information. So in this theoretical scenario, an agency is redesigning a company's website. After meeting with the primary department affected, there's going to be a remote workshop with a broader set of managers and company stakeholders who have a stake in it. There's lots of questions we have, but we only have so much time where we have all these folks together in one virtual room because of the times we live in. And so the question is how to narrow down your list of questions so you make the best use of time during your workshop.
I have a tool for you. Hold, please.
Oh, okay.
It is called Stakeholder Questions. Let me get it for you. This is an excellent question and one that comes up so often that I developed this tool.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm trying to learn a little bit more about the right way to do workshops, and I just bought that other one of those, the workshop book and all, and I'm just trying to say, hey, when do you use that as the method? Not just the only method, but the right use for it.
Right. Here you go. I'll put this in. There you go. So that tool will help you frame your questions in terms of the different types of stakeholders. One thing that I like to do in my workshop, though, is prime my pumps, right? Find out who are the believers who really wants this project to go forward, and find out who are the naysayers and who doesn't, right? And then I want to do a little bit of recon, right? So do your research before your workshop, right? Find out who's there doing what, right? What are their attitudes and behaviors? And then you can use this stakeholder tool to help organize the questions, some of which you might want to ask and gather feedback on before your workshop. So you can go into your workshop having an informed opinion, already having shaped a lot of the activities. When you're designing your workshops too, I find it really, really helpful to clarify what the workshop is intended to do, what are the goals, and what it is not intended to do. So maybe the workshop is about generating ideas. It's not about making decisions. But be very clear and intentional about that. You also want to make sure, I'm assuming this is going to be a remote workshop, you're going to want to also make sure that you're set up for success in terms of everybody has cleared their calendar for those 2 hours, and everybody is expected to stay for those 2 hours or however long. And if you cannot, like, get out now. But you want to set that up for success too.
All right. Thank you so much for the detailed info.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, we got another great question from Tammy. Could you elaborate on the degree of confidence? How do you measure degree of confidence for qualitative data?
So it will depend on what we're trying to measure. And also the culture in which you're working with. If you're working with a very UX mature organization, they may be more comfortable with, say, speaking with fewer people because they have other data or other sources of truth from which to triangulate. Or maybe you're working as part of a rolling research program and you'll be able to dig deeper and increase your confidence with additional studies. There are things like calculators that you can use to measure quantitative data. A great resource for that is Measuring You. And that website is MEASURING and then the letter U.com. And you can play with the numbers there to identify what level or how many people you need to speak with to be statistically relevant, or with what level of confidence.
That's fantastic, Joel. Thank you for sharing, Michelle. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself to ask away as well, or you can leave your question on the chat too. All right. While we wait for others' question, I had a question myself. So, like earlier you showed the example of research that you've done, which was a combination of generative and evaluative research, where you got your participants to draw the iterated version that they would want to see. So one struggle that I have as a researcher is the similar concept, the confidence, like make sure that it's not biased with one's opinion. So when you're doing that research that you showed, that where you got the design, the ideal design from people, how did you make sure that it's not, the data is not contaminated when you're using that input to iterate?
Well, in that particular situation, the first person just described what they had expected to see. And then the second person started to describe the exact same thing. So I just asked them to draw how this might manifest or what they envision. So it was just a very raw, unaided. I mean, the only aid there was to visualize what they were describing. So there wasn't any sort of contamination there. Going back to now, I would never say to the participant, oh, that's just like the behavior that you see at Williams-Sonoma or whatever retailer, Target. But when going back to the design team, it arms you with much more evidence, if you will, to present that story, that what happens when there is a disconnect when people choose to take a closer look at an object or an item on the website and the experience that follows after. What they expect to see is, if they want to take a closer look, they're expecting to see that item to be much larger and to have much easier access to different views of that item. And that is an existing behavior on most retail sites today. As you can see, I asked them to draw this expectation. And then here is how it manifests on Target, on Williams Sonoma, on whatever, Sears Roebuck, or things like that.
Gotcha. Thank you, Michelle. Meanwhile, we got another question came in, which is probably a question that you get a lot. So how do you convey to stakeholders or slash doubters that qualitative research is just as sound and credible as quantitative research?
Well, it's not like I would argue it. It's different. So quantitative research can tell you what happened and when it happened, but it can't tell you why it happened. So I would probably, in a similar way that I mentioned to Randy, you want to do your research first and find out what experiences has this naysayer had with qualitative research in the past, and then I would approach it that way. So was it not useful? Was it poorly executed? Do they think it takes a long time? Do they think it's expensive? And I would probably frame my response based on that situation. And then also, just look for an opportunity to educate them about the difference between the two. They don't answer the same types of questions.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you, Michelle. Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Any last words, Michelle?
I'm just so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to go ahead and put my LinkedIn link in here, and please connect with me, say hi, and stay in touch as you grow your own research skill sets. I'm cheering you on. Help us grow our industry, join our village, join our mission, help the world become a better place. Learn how to ask better questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I will share all the tools that Michelle shared on the chat today on our UX Rescue Slack channel as well. And one exciting news for UX Rescue is on September 17th, we will be speaking at Design Conference, Design Conf by Learners. So if you haven't grabbed your ticket, go to designconfbylearners.com and make sure that you RSVP for all the amazing talks. All right. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of content coming from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.